is very interesting. And I will say that broadly speaking, the witnesses were in general agreement about how he looked. Firstly, he was generally agreed to be a white man or Caucasian. That's to say, he was not black, not Asian. He was white. In those days, people did not really make a distinction between white European, white Hispanic, white Latin. There wasn't even a census definition at that time. But out of the, I think, approximately 8 witnesses who gave a view about his ethnicity, 6 of them described him simply as white, and 2 of them gave the impression that they saw something Latin about him. Now, that Latin aspect has been picked up, Latin, Latino, Hispanic, whatever you want to call it, has been picked up by many people and become central to the narrative, but I believe it's not. A couple of witnesses saw something Latin about him, but, Latin can be somebody like Robert De Niro. It can be somebody like Al Pacino. So it doesn't necessarily imply that the guy is Mexican or has, if you like, Native American or South American features that you would identify, let's say, by cheekbones or other things. Having said that, there was one passenger who was very insistent that, in his mind, the hijacker was Mexican or Native American. And he repeated this many times. He was the only one who thought this. I don't put much weight by his testimony. I don't think he was well placed to see the hijacker. He was not in a seat that he could see the hijacker very well. He was just very insistent on this, that the hijacker had this somehow ethnic look about him. But he was one out of many. Again, because that story is interesting, people have picked up on it and run with it. I don't particularly buy into that story. The same witness who thought the hijacker was maybe Native American was also insistent that he had hair, and he used this very strange expression, or let's say unusual expression. He called it marcelled. Okay, if you remember Chuck Berry had hair which you would probably call marcelled. It means a lot of oil on it, a lot of grease on it, and then you pat it down to make waves in it. That's, as my understanding, that's marcelled. Well, he was insistent on marcelled, and he beat the FBI with this story many times. But in fact, the junior stewardess who sat with the hijacker physically next to him for the entire flight from Portland to Seattle, which was well over 1.5 hours, and who could know better than her, she was insistent that in his hair, there was no wave, no curl, no kink. She said that it's in writing. So where does this marcelled come from? I have no idea. There are the 2 witnesses who I think by far their testimony outweighs the others are the junior and the second stewardess. The junior stewardess was 5'8" herself. She was a tall woman. And she put the hijacker at 5'10" to 6 foot. In other words, he was taller than her. I find that convincing. I find that credible. Other people thought he was shorter, but they saw him sitting down. Some people said slumped in his seat, scrunched down in his seat. So how could they know his height? So I will go with 5'10" to 6'1". I think that's plausible. So he's a tall guy. He's also thin. Nearly everybody put in 170 to 180 pounds, which is thin for a guy that tall. Americans that tall in those days would be well over 200 pounds. So here's a guy that's pretty thin, tall, white. He speaks English with no detectable accent. Of course, for Americans, if you speak with a Midwest accent or even an accent of Toronto or English Canada, that will be perceived as no accent. Because for Americans, an accent pretty much means a Texan accent or a Southern accent, or it could mean a Brooklyn accent. You know, there was some very distinct accent in the States, but he didn't have any of those. If you don't have any of those and you're an American talking to another American, you will say this guy has no accent. Okay, what else? His hair is black. He has a full head of hair. He's not noticeably balding or receding. There is no trace of gray in his hair. It's black. He parts his hair on the left, which is totally normal. It's the way nearly everybody parted their hair in those days. His hair is short. It's combed down. In other respects, his face is forgettable. There's nothing unusual about his face. He's the face that you would forget. He would pass you in the street and you would forget his face. Possibly only two things that would have helped to recognize him again. Number one, as I said, the loose skin under his neck, what the student called the turkey gobble. And also, one or more of the stewardesses remembered that he had slightly protruding lower lip. His lower lip slightly protruding. These are the only two characteristics that distinguished his face. And the FBI, I think, never really picked those up to the point of making them part of the elimination process, which with hindsight, it seems to me it would have saved them a lot of time.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, we've got some great stuff there. So in terms of where we are in the story, we're now in Seattle. Yes, the Seattle airport. The money is handed over. The FBI get their hands on the money.
Yeah.
How does the money get onto the plane?
The money is collected from a bank, and it comes in a bank bag. I think these bank bags were very commonly in use. Probably couriers used them to carry money from one place to another. It was in the nature of a canvas sack, quite a big, bulky sack, heavy material. One witness described it very precisely as being about 1.5 feet wide. He thought it was probably about 1 foot deep and maybe 2 feet high. So it's a big, chunky bag. And it has two handles on the top. This bag arrives. It's given to one of the Northwest people on the ground. The stewardess, the junior stewardess, is then permitted by the hijacker to go down and meet the Northwest guy, take the bag from him, and bring it back into the airplane. And it's sufficiently heavy that and again, a little bit different accounts. By some accounts, she carries it, and by some other accounts, she drags it, because it's that heavy, down the aisle. And the passengers at this point are still on board. So there are some who notice this. The stewardess carrying or dragging a heavy bag. They don't know what's in it. Some of them guess it's money. But that happens while the passengers are still on board. She drags it down to the hijacker sitting in the back seat. He looks at it. He says, yeah, looks okay, something like that. And at that point, subsequent to that, the passengers are allowed to get on. I think the parachutes arrive approximately the same time. They are carried separately. Again, the junior stewardess picks them up. She brings them into the plane. Again, the FBI files give you some indication that some passengers notice these parachutes, or they recognize them as parachutes and not as something else. I think it's quite easy. I myself have done a few parachute jumps. A parachute packed in its container looks just like a backpack. It isn't necessarily a parachute. So, you need to be a little bit familiar with parachutes to recognize a main backpack chute as a parachute and not as a backpack. But anyway, some passengers, maybe one or two, I forget how many, said they thought they saw parachutes coming on board. None of them, I think, ever clicked that this was a hijack. So there we are. He's got his chutes, he's got his money, the passengers get off.
Yeah.
He allows two stewardesses to get off, the senior stewardess, who had been serving the first class, so she never really got much look at him, and the second stewardess, who had received his note in the first place, but after that kind of got out of the picture. And he stays with the junior stewardess, and he says, "You stay with me, we're going places." So right now there's him, there's the junior stewardess, and there's the three flight crew on the flight deck who have never seen the guy and will never see the guy. And he says, "We're going to Mexico."
Right.
That's the short story.
Yeah. It's so from the pilot's perspective, what happens? I mean, so the hijacker gives the flight crew a specific set of instructions about how high they can fly, how fast they can go, the altitude, the speed, and that they're refueling in Reno, right?
He agrees after some negotiation that they can take on fuel in Reno. They proposed some options.
Okay.
He says Reno. But other than that, he in fact gives only one aeronautical instruction. Sorry, he gives two, maybe three. Okay, the one that is definitely for sure is that he says 10,000 feet. Okay, you don't exceed 10,000 feet. He also says, put the flaps at 15 degrees. Put the flaps at 15. Okay, this is a technical instruction, which implies that he knows what flaps are and what they do. If you're a pilot, or even if you're not a pilot and you're familiar with airplanes, you know that the flaps give you more lift and they allow you to fly more slowly at a given power setting than if you had the flaps up. And I think, now I'm speaking from memory, I think he also says gear down. But unless I check my notes, I can't remember if he said that or if they assume. I think, in fact, he did say, yes, you've got to put gear down. Because I recall now that after takeoff, they mistakenly put the gear up and then they think, oh, shoot, he said gear down. And they quickly put the gear back down again. So yeah, there are three instructions. One, 10,000 feet. Two, flaps at 15. And three, gear down. That's all he says. He doesn't tell them anything about the route they should fly. However, and I think this is an important point, if you're limited to 10,000 feet, there is only one route you can fly, and that's Victor 23. If you're a pilot and you have to do 10,000 feet and you have to go south from Seattle, on your port beam, you're going to have the high Cascades. It's a mountain range. There are three big peaks in the high Cascades. There's Mount Hood, there's Mount Jefferson, and there's what they call the Three Sisters. These three mountains, the highest of them is Mount Hood, goes over 11,000 feet. So if you're told you cannot exceed 10,000 feet, you for sure want to miss Mount Hood. The best way to miss Mount Hood is to fly Victor 23. So although the air traffic control told them fly Victor 23,